Betsy Irwin, and today we are going to talk about and demonstrate gourds. And first I'd like to present some information and a brief history on gourds and how they came to the Americas. And then I would like to demonstrate how to make a small gourd bottle. Gourds are a bitter, somewhat inedible squash. They're members of the cucurbit family, and that's along with cucumbers, melons, and several other types of edible foods. They are hollow when they're dry, and the interesting thing about gourds is as they dry, the exterior shell gets really hard and woody and sometimes can be up to about a ½ inch thick. This makes them perfect for creating containers as well as many other things. There are three main categories of gourds. We've got ornamental gourds, and these belong to the Cucurbita pepo family. And these are the small, brightly colored gourds that have relatively thin shells that you see in the grocery stores at Thanksgiving, and a lot of people use them for table decorations, that sort of thing, but they're really not usable for making containers out of. Next you have the loofah gourds, and those are the natural sponges that are so popular. It's also interesting to note that loofahs are eaten when the fruit of the plant is immature in many countries in Southeast Asia. Most gourds grow on vines, but there is a calabash tree, and it likely came from Africa, although we find them in South America and even in South Florida now. Speaking of origins, scientists think that gourds came from two separate places, from Africa and from Asia. And there's evidence that both of these types of gourds were brought into the Americas fairly early on. Now, the African gourds, it's hypothesized that they floated in on the Gulf Stream just as gourds, and that they beached and then were found and grown by Native Americans after that. The other theory or hypothesis is that the gourd seeds and the gourd plant, or the fruit itself, was brought over when people migrated into North America during the Ice Age. And some scientists believe that they could have been domesticated as early as 10,000 years ago. There have been seeds found at an Ice Age archaeological site, and so there's this argument, did gourds come from Africa or did they come from Asia? Well, the truth is likely they both came from both places, and that they floated in on the Gulf Stream, and some of those gourds were grown as well as the Asian ones, and that they came in with people as they migrated into the Americas. So really, as you can see, gourds are an incredibly handy plant for humans to have, and because they come in so many different shapes and sizes, there's really just an almost unlimited number of things that you can do with them. And I'm going to show you a few of those things, and then we'll move on to our project. So first, I'm going to show you, these are two little gourd earrings. And then this is a little angel ornament that was made out of a miniature bottle gourd. Here's another Peruvian ornament. This one is an owl. And there have been gourds remains that have been found with very similar designs, and the way that they did this with just wood burning and carving and then staining the different gourds. There have been remains that have been found similar to this as old as 4,000 years old. Gourds are also used for musical instruments, mainly percussion, but occasionally you'll see stringed instruments. And here's a rattle that has been decorated with southeastern Native American designs. And here is an African percussion instrument. I guess you could call it a rattle, though I'm not sure. Beads have been woven around the outside, and then as you rotate the gourds, the beads make a sound. Dippers. This one has not been cut yet or washed, so that you can kind of see how they look in the raw. Here's a jar. Of course, you know they could also be made into bottles, and we'll be making a small medicine bottle. And then this particular container is just a pot. It looks very much like a ceramic vessel. In fact, people have confused it for one many times. A modern sculpture. And then a birdhouse. It's interesting to note that the Choctaw people hung birdhouses all around their village to attract martin birds as a form of insect control. Martins eat mosquitoes, and as you know, many people hang martin bird gourds. And finally, I have a small bowl here that you can see that we've just started working on. So here's some of the different things. Obviously, there's many, many more things that you can make out of gourds, and you are only limited by your imagination. So the first thing that I've done to start on our medicine bottle is to just draw a line around the top where I want to cut the lid off of this little bottle. And I'm going to make a starter cut with an X-Acto knife so that I can work my jigsaw blade in there. And then I have a small miniature jigsaw, which I really love this instrument because it works really well. It's got a little foot pedal, so I just put the blade down into the gourd, and I just do it a little bit at a time. There's the top off of it. Now I'm going to go back and trim it back up a little bit more so that we can go ahead and start sanding on it. I'm going to go ahead and just put a piece of sandpaper down. And this is a pretty low grit, 60, and I'm going to start with that. And I'm just looking to get the top nice and smooth. And there it is. Now, a lot of gourds on the inside of them, you really have to scrape them out. These really small bottle gourds happen to come very, very clean. So all I'm going to do is just get the seeds out and trim along the top a little bit. There's really no need to clean the inside out. However, if you do have a gourd and you need to clean the inside out, I would recommend grapefruit spoons, and there are also certain ceramic tools, loop tools, that are good for cleaning the insides out, and then a little sandpaper and a little elbow grease always helps. Now I'm just going to come back in with my X-Acto knife, and I'm just barely trimming the inside of this part to get it nice and even. And then I'll probably go back with a fine grit of sandpaper and sand that down too, just to make it nice and smooth all the way around. And while I'm here, I'm going to poke a hole in the middle. And should you ever want to grow a gourd, there's millions of seeds in every single gourd. So there's nothing for you, no lack of plants to find. I'm just going to break the rest of these seeds up to get them out of the middle of this bottle. Well, I think that's about got it. Now I'm just going to sand the inside part of this and get the lip a little bit smoothed on the inside. And this is 120 grit on the sandpaper. And I believe I got these gourds off of Etsy or eBay. If you look up small Chinese bottle gourds for sale, you can find these miniature ones. Some of them are small enough for jewelry. Some of them are perfect size for these little medicine bottles that I've been making. So I'm just going to completely sand the white from the inside of this. As you can see, it doesn't take a whole lot. It's nice and smooth on the inside now. So I'm going to get my pencils out and we will start with the next part. So basically now what we're going to do is we are going to grid off this gourd in a manner similar to a globe. And the reason I do this is so that if you have a repeating design, no matter what size it needs to be, it's all relative according to the size and shape of the gourd. And you'll understand a little better what I'm saying in just a moment. So the first thing I do is I go ahead and I divide the gourd off into quarters, and I basically just make little tick marks. And of course a gourd isn't perfectly, perfect any one size or the other, so you have to sort of just make it up as you go. And then from that, I just start drawing a line down. And I'm going to connect it to the other side. And really, I do this for almost any project that has any kind of repeating design on it. It just makes it so much easier to deal with. You know exactly where your design's going to be. And like I said, the size and the shape are about the same also. So now I'm going to go ahead and clean up my lines just a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to split the difference so that I actually have 8 vertical lines. And here I can also see if I've gotten one a little too close or too far from the other one. So I can kind of recenter things as I'm going also. I am going to pause and go ahead and finish these lines and then show you how we do the longitude or horizontal lines. So we've got the vertical lines on, and now we are going to do the horizontal lines. And it's just a series of circles. So I try to mark it around the top and the bottom. Then I kind of look at it from the top to make sure it's fairly round. And these are just reference points anyway, so it does not have to be perfect. And like I said before, the gourd's not even, so. All right, so there's the one on the top. Now I'm going to try and mirror it on the bottom. By mirror, I mean I'm going to try and make, to the best of my ability, these lines parallel. And again, I have to take into consideration the shape of the gourd a little bit. There's the bottom and the top. And now I just kind of take a look at it, and I am going to put 2 more lines in the middle, so I'm basically going to divide it into thirds. Here's the gourd after it's been gridded off, and you can see how it resembles a globe, and from that we're going to pick our design. And I normally like to put a design on a medicine bottle that will tell you what is in the medicine bottle. Per my mentor, Kent Riley, who studied iconography of the southeastern people and really likes to tell the stories behind the different vessels and the different symbols and what all of that means. And I think what I'm going to put on here is a abstracted symbol for the hummingbird hawk moth, and that's because hummingbird hawk moths pollinated tobacco, and the symbols for them were frequently used on different medicine bottles at Moundville. And the reason I'm going to put that on the outside of this bottle is so that we can put tobacco on the inside of the bottle. Which, it being a medicine bottle, I thought tobacco would be appropriate. I'm just going to make some circular shapes, and to keep them the same size, I have a little bit of a flexible template that I'm going to use, and I just basically am going to place the template down around the crosshairs on one of these, and I'll even that back out on these every other line here. So the next part of this is starting in between these lands, as there is a line that runs above one circle and below the next circle. So I'm going to go ahead and mark halfway points between the circles here, so that I know where my line's going to go. Here. And then I'm going to start down at the bottom and go through and down through the next corner. And you see how gridding this off really makes a difference now. It really keeps your design so much more even. Halfway down through here, I come down. And then I'm going to come back up to the crosshairs here. Although I'm going to start this down in the corner, I will be erasing part of this design later. Like I said, I'm just using this for reference at the moment. Okay, now for all practical purposes, I can go ahead and erase my longitude and latitude lines, because I pretty well got everything centered where I want it. I just need to go ahead and erase and clean up what I've got, and then finish the design. I have erased most of the marks. So now I have corrected the design and basically got it penciled on the way that I would like. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to wood burden the design onto the outside of the medicine bottle. Now comes the fun part, wood burning. It has adjustable temperature, And with these little gourds, I usually start off low and then work up. Basically, you just use this like you would a pen and start burning. And it's slow going a little bit. The main thing that you have to remember is that there are going to be spots on the gourd that are soft and they're going to burn quicker, and there are going to be spots on the gourd that are hard and they are going to burn slower. So I always brace what I'm doing. And when you lift up for a line, then I go back in, I'll take a look at what I've done and smooth over or correct anything. If you're just starting to wood burn, I would suggest that you start with just a good wood burner, craft store wood burner that has a temperature control on it and a couple of different tips. And the best way to learn how to wood burn is to just get a scrap piece of gourd and practice making X's, S's, and O's. And if you can do those movements, you can do just about anything. I've gotten to a spot that's a little bit harder, and to get that the way I want, I just have to go over it a couple of times. And notice that I'm also turning the gourd as I'm wood burning. It's much easier to turn the gourd along with moving your pen than it is just to try and move the pen tip itself. So there's one line that's been burned. And that's why it's important to go ahead and pencil this stuff in so that you can really get a nice clean line on there. Once I finish wood burning this, I'll go ahead and erase the pencil marks, and then I will go back over and burn in darker anything that I need to burn in darker, scratch out anything where I've messed up. If I've messed up a little bit inside my lines, it's okay because I can use paint to cover up any mistakes. So always, if you're gonna mess up on the inside of your land, of your design, and not on the outside. Now the gourd's been completely wood burned and it's ready to be painted. I'm also going to add some metal leaf to it after I paint part of the design. I really like the effect that leaf has on gourd. And I picked out a turquoise metallic paint. All of the paints that I use are from Welburn Gourd Farm. In fact, a lot of the tools that I purchased also came from that website. It is probably the largest gourd website out there, and they have virtually everything that you could possibly need to do anything that you would like to a gourd. So these clean up with a special and these little brushes, these little micro brushes, also come from the Welburn Gourd Farm website. And the reason I use them is they can just lay the paint in between these burn lines, and it really delineates it nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and paint for a little bit. You notice I'm just kind of dragging the paint. I want to make sure that I have enough on the brush. One thing about gourds is the paint lays on the top of the gourd. You can sand the gourd before you paint it, or you can seal it afterwards. I prefer to go ahead and just seal it And with these paints, it works just very, very well. Again, notice that my pinky finger is bracing everything that I'm doing on this gourd. And I'm going to finish up this one portion of this design. Oh, there you are. Not that much to it. And again, don't forget Welborn Gourd Farms for all of these cool little brushes and really neat paints. Okay, so one thing I forgot to mention about these paints, and actually these are archival metallic inks, is that they set with heat. And so that's very important. You only do 1 or 2 designs at a time so that you're not rubbing your hand up against the wet part of the gourd. And I just use a hair dryer. And the way that you can tell when they're dry is they'll the color will actually flatten out a little bit. Of course, you could touch it to see if it's dry also, but if you hit a wet spot and it spreads, it's a little bit tricky to get it all off sometimes. So I have applied a thin gilding adhesive on 3 of the little circles here, and I'm going to apply just a little bit more to this last one, and then I'm going to show you how to leaf. And you really want this pretty wet and thin. You can thin it with a little bit of water if you need to. It also cleans up with soap and water, which is nice. So now basically I just lay this in there. I'm not trying to brush it on too much. I want a fairly thick coat, and then I just kind of push it all the way to the edge. And you really want to try and make sure you get enough on the edge, but not get it to fall down into the crack. After you put the leaf on and apply it, I also go back and clean it up a little bit, and sometimes it just misses a spot. But as you can see, I'm not really trying to paint this on. It's thin and kind of milky. And I just want to make sure I get it all the way to the edge. And then once that dries, you do the next step, which is apply the leaf, and this will dry clear, as you see on these other 3 circles. So I'm just going to pick out a piece of leaf where I like the colors on it, and I'm going to try and sort of stick with the same theme for all of the dots because there's so many different kinds in there. And I lightly press it down, and I just put it right on top of the adhesive. And you can use a little foam brush, or you can use a regular paintbrush. I kind of like these silicone brushes because they sort of burnish the metal in place. And now whatever doesn't have the adhesive on it comes off. You can kind of get in the cracks a little bit with this, but I'm going to go back with an X-Acto knife and clean it up. And then once I'm pretty sure I've got it burnished in place pretty well, I will take a larger brush and just brush the rest of the leaf off. I see some of it stuck to the ink a little bit where it wasn't quite dry. I don't really mind that though. Okay. So now I'm going to go back in with my X-Acto knife, and I'm going to clean up along the edges here so I have a nice clean line. And I'm just running my X-Acto knife blade in the crack where I wood burned initially. And then I come back and just brush that leaf out of there. And there you have it. And finally, after I finish all of this, I'm going to show you how we seal it, which is a pretty simple affair, and then we will be good to go. So finally, we're going to seal the gourd, and I'm just going to seal the metallic parts on here, and I'm going to put 2 or 3 coats on, and afterwards I will seal the entire thing, but it's going to have to dry in between coats. So the first thing that we're going to do is apply the adhesive over the painted parts. And what I usually do is just put a little in my tray here. Try not to get it confused with the adhesive, right? And I like to get my brush just a little bit wet and dip it in there. You want it pretty fluid. And I'm just going to lightly paint over the area. And it doesn't matter if it gets a little bit out of the lines, because you're going to seal the whole thing. So that's basically it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to come back on one last time and put a cork in the bottle. Finally, we've got our gourd all sealed and ready to fill. And over here, I've got a little gourd bowl, and it's got some ceremonial tobacco in it. And I'm just going to place a couple of pieces on the inside of my medicine bottle. And there you go. And I have a little cork that fits in the top of it. So that's how you make a small medicine bottle from a gourd. I appreciate you being here. I thank the Porch Band of Creek Indians for allowing me to share my craft and my art and the knowledge that I've gained from working with the Southeastern Native American people for many, many years.